Introducing Minor Wisdom Quintet.
1, 2, a skidadidoo.
Minor wisdom.
Hello, everyone. So this week I've got Tim Estelle on. Tim is somebody that I've wanted to get on for quite a while, but I've got certain people that I guess I put in my back pocket as far as wanting to get on the podcast that I feel like are just no doubters. Like they're going to say, heck yeah, let's do it. And I don't know if Tim is that guy. I don't know if anybody is that guy or girl, but I just assumed Tim would be. So when I reached out to Tim and said, hey, you drew the short straw, buddy, he was super happy to oblige and came on. And then I completely embarrassed myself, and I had technical difficulties for some reason, and I still don't know what it was, because the next day I put a couple of interviews in the can, and everything was fine and normal and working normal. But Tim's, between the two of us, the connection wasn't working for Zoom on my computer, and I couldn't hear a word he was saying. He could hear everything what I was saying, and from what I saw from this lighting guy's world, all of my sound equipment was doing everything it was supposed to do. And so anyway, this one sounds a little funky because I ended up recording him. I just recorded the Zoom, as many of us are accustomed to now. I just recorded our Zoom conversation, so it sounds like I'm in a can of some sort, and he sounds great, and that's about all I can tell you. So I apologize for the audio. It's really not that bad, but for someone like me who does this kind of stuff for a living and prides himself on good tech, this one sucked as far as that is concerned. However, the interview itself was amazing. Tim is just an extremely well-spoken person. He should, in his next life outside of education, I don't think there will be a life outside of education. Once you get to talk to him and get to know him, you're going to realize education is his life. And so anyway, but if there is a next life, Tim would be just a great orator, or right? Not an oracle, that'd be something different, but an orator. He would just be really good at that stuff. So I really enjoyed talking to him. Didn't have lots of uhs and ums and all that kind of stuff, which I'm very guilty of, but he was just really well spoken. And none of these questions that I ever ask these people, with the exception of a couple of interviews of some people that I've had on in the past, none of the questions are predetermined really, except for the very first one, which is just tell me about your background. And so when I have my guests on, their answers are as spontaneous as my questions most of the time. Again, I've had a couple of people on here that have kind of not necessarily insisted that I prep them with some questions, but just felt more comfortable if I did. And that's hard because I'm an organic son of a gun. I'm a improviser, and it is what it is. So there are a couple things I needed to talk about. And I know this podcast isn't a complaint podcast, and that's how it actually started, and my wife said, don't do that. That's not a complaint, but and thankfully it is not a complaint podcast. Otherwise, it probably wouldn't be into 130 plus episodes. But I have two things I want to talk about, and they might be sensitive topics, whatever. I don't care, but it's my podcast. It's called Minor Wisdom for a reason. One is the mask issue, and here's the thing: whether you want to mask or not, and I know I've talked about this. This one particular story is the reason why this country right now is so odd to me. And I'm not, again, nothing political or anything. It's just a matter of mindset right now about how people are thinking. And so this quick little story, I went to my daughter's school as I record this today. It was for lunch, and I went to her school to drop off a cake and some lunch, a small cake, a nothing bundt cake, which BT dubs are delicious. Anyway, and you can tell a lot of people buy red velvet because they had double the red velvet compared to anything else. But anyway, I went to her school, and her district that she's in starts with a K and ends with a line. Their district is extremely anti-mask, not anti-mask, but pro-choice, I guess, if you will, which is ironic. And so they are pro-choice when it comes to masks, not anything else. And so they nobody wears a mask. None of the teachers, none of the people that work there, nobody, no faculty, no staff, nobody. My daughter does because her parents are smart. And so I go there and I'm in line and I'm behind these two people that have clearly been there before. Nobody's wearing a mask except for me. And I'm in line behind these two people, and they say to the woman in the office, like, wow, are you all by yourself today? And she goes, yeah. Again, no mask. She goes, yeah, there are 10 people out this week. 10. Like, I can't believe it. Like, I can't even understand why all these people are getting sick. And I really, oh man. Yeah. So side note to that, I'm tight with my former superintendent, Dr. Dupree, and texted him a couple days ago that I'm becoming the parent that he probably used to hate, because I've emailed the superintendent of said district a couple of times to just kind of ask a question. I wasn't accusing anyone of anything, but anyway, so he asked me if I constantly have an internal monologue, and I said it's not as internal as it used to be anymore because I wear a mask all the time and nobody can see my mouth moving. And he said, "Are you serious?" And I said, "Yes." I think that's true for a lot of people. Like right now, part of why I love wearing a mask is because I can talk some shit about people and you don't know because you don't see my mouth moving. So anyway, the other thing I was going to mention is, so I'm in a situation this past week, or I was in a situation where I came to the realization, I'm not going to get into too many details because it has to do with my current job, my job, which I hope to be my last job I ever have. But I came to the realization that no matter how old you are, the world is becoming, or the people of the world are losing the ability to simply communicate. And it's not, we can't be these old fuddy-duddies. I'm almost 40. I can't be this guy that says, back in my day, we used to just talk to people instead of texting people. Like, no, I can't. You can't do that anymore. Even old people, even like 60, which is like super old, right? But like people that are these get off my lawn type people can't say, we used to communicate all the time. Well, I've noticed that there are quite a few people significantly older than me that have also lost the ability to communicate. And I'm not talking about like through an illness. I'm just talking about because they too are addicted to phones. And don't get me wrong, I love my phone. I look at my screen, but I'm also a hell of a communicator. I will talk and I'm a lot better at listening, but I like to communicate. I want to know if I can be of more service to you. I want to know how I can help you. I want you to know how you can help me. And I like to talk about it, whether it be through email or this thing right here. You can't see where I'm pointing at, but I'm pointing to my mouth. I actually did point to my mouth. I don't know why. I'm not on video, but man, it's frustrating when you do as best you can to communicate with people. So I ask you this, maybe I do a new like segment. I used to have a joke on here, but maybe I do a new segment where we talk about like how to be better. And we watched something at my school this past week talking about the 1%, and it discussed the English cycling team, I want to say. I'm pretty sure the English cycling team, and how they had a new coach come in 2003, 2004 for the Tour de France. And they said that we're going to win this Tour de France within the next 5 years. And they ended up winning it in a short amount of time. There's a whole interview. This isn't breaking news or anything. There's a whole thing about it. But they ended up winning. And the way they did it is they fixed something changed something 1% at a time. And so we had a discussion. I had a discussion with my students, with my advisees, about what is 1% of your day. And we figured out if you, 17 hours a day, if you're awake, let's say on average, that's about 10 minutes a day, right? It's about 10 minutes a day. If you took 10 minutes a day to improve yourself, do something positive, whatever you value. It doesn't have to be something somebody else values. It could be you. Because one kid jokingly, this little smart-ass kid was like, well, I just go shoot hoops. And I was like, yeah, okay, cool. That's exactly what I'm talking about. If you want to be better at basketball, if you value that, then go be better at basketball. Another kid, I'll play more video games. All right, cool, man. If you want to like be the best video game player, like you're not going to tell me like that's stupid. Like I play video games. So take 10 minutes to be better a day, 10 minutes to improve on something. And right now I'm asking you to take 10 minutes just to be a better communicator. The irony of that is I flubbed and I almost edited that out because I can't communicate. Thanks to you, stupid Candy Crush. All right, I've talked enough. Tim Estelle is up. Thanks to those people that constantly listen. Thanks to, Billy shot me a text this past week just to say I have been listening. I hope everybody's in good health. I know there's some people out there that are struggling right now. I've really enjoyed the feedback that I've been getting from people, including the ones that I've been interviewing. Communicate, Blake. I'm humbled and I appreciate it. Yes, there's no advertising on this podcast. There doesn't need to be. I'm not in this for the money. I'm in this because I genuinely feel I've been put on this earth just to get to know you. And I love getting to know people. Whether you find the interviews entertaining or not, I had a blast every time talking to these people and just getting to know them. And I appreciate all the support. So please, follow me on Twitter, friend me on Facebook, which again, I know I say every week, that seems to be the thing to do. And, find me on TikTok. I do a couple TikToks, I had a fun one this past week with Segi from Straight No Chaser. I did not do the fun part. He ended up doing the fun comedy part, and it was really cool. But anyway, enjoy this Tim Estelle interview. Tim, I apologize for the long opening. Bobby, I hope you listened to the whole thing. Have a good week. I hope everybody stays safe. Oh, and everybody that was affected by Nicholas. Damn you, Nicholas. Can we leave Louisiana alone for a little bit? Like, we'll take a hurricane just once. I don't think it's going to happen because of this cold front coming through. But anyway, hurricanes, let's leave Louisiana alone a little bit. So hope everybody has a great week. Let's get through it. My daughter's birthday is tomorrow as I record this. She'll be 9. Oi, go Vault. All right, Tim, it's all you, buddy.
My journey's kind of not too terribly interesting. So I got into this gig, and by that I mean I got into theater as a 6th grade rotation student in middle school. I had just moved to Texas as a 5th grader. So like the concept of just being in a much larger state, having come from upstate New York, was kind of overwhelming. And so I didn't really know where I fit in as far as what I was supposed to do in school. And so when I got to middle school, which was that in of itself was a new concept for me, I was like, well, I got to take something. And even back in when that was, a fine arts credit at the middle school was still a requirement. And so I did the rotation, or what some people call the wheel. And I had a really dynamic theater teacher as a 6th grader who just captivated me. He was engaging, he was caring, he was smart, and just had a lot of characteristics and qualities that I, as just a young person, was just really fascinated by. And so I remember after I got through that rotation, because it was about 12 weeks, I think is what it normally is. And I moved into, it was either visual art or I think choir. And it was just always in the back of my mind, like, hey, I kind of liked that thing. Like we did some fun projects. And so that being said, when I got to the choir part, I kind of liked that too. And it wasn't really something I'd ever really thought about doing. And so moving into I picked up and stuck with choir, and even into the 8th grade was a part of the men's choir, as they used to call it. Now it's the treble bass choir, which is much more appropriate. And being in there, there was just something missing. And so I was talking to my mom, and she's like, well, why don't you try out for a play or something like that? And of course, when parents say that, you're like, I'm not going to do that. What does that even mean? And so she went and grabbed her high school yearbook and showed me a photo. She's like, look, I did theater when I was around your age. And that was like, it's like all of a sudden you're like, oh, okay, I guess I can do this. If you can do it, I can do it. Right. And it's really inspiring. And so I tried out for my first play as an 8th grader, and it was The Three Musketeers. And I don't even remember what 2 roles I was given. I just know I had like 1 or 2 lines on stage. And I absolutely shouted every single line that came out of my mouth. There was no variety in anything that I was saying. There was no different levels. It was just pure, unadulterated shouting. But it just felt really good. And so from there, I knew that that was my thing, even though I wasn't in a class. And so fast forwarding a little bit, I didn't take a formal theater class until I was in high school. Beyond that rotation I took as a 6th grader. And there was this weird hiatus in my kind of experience, because I came from a military family. And so we moved quite a bit. And San Antonio, which is where I spent most of my childhood and teenage years, was technically our last stop. That's where my dad officially retired. And whenever you retire from kind of public service to the military and you go into the private sector, it can get a little tricky. And so he took a job that took us all the way up north, and we moved to Wisconsin. And so we went up there, and I was really excited. I had all this energy as an 8th grader about theater. And the first question I asked the counselor when we were sitting there trying to figure out, what school was going to look like for me, I said, "Oh, I want to do theater. Where's the class? How do I sign up for that?" And they're like, "Oh, we don't have that here." And it was just mind blowing, because I'm like, well, that was always offered to me from 6th grade, whether I took it or not. And all of a sudden now I'm in a different state and it's not an option. And so it became really clear to me that I needed to find a way to get into that somehow, even if it didn't exist. And so that 8th grade year, living in outside of Madison, Wisconsin, I would ask my parents to take me to stuff that came into, because the University of Wisconsin's there, so they have a big performing arts venue and center. And so if shows came, I would ask for them to take me to that. And that was kind of my way to still stay engaged. And then about the end of that year, like the greatest news ever, not that Wisconsin's a bad place to live. I'm sure there's really great people who are from there who probably listen to this. And this isn't anything against that state or anyone there, but it just wasn't for me. And the best news was my dad said, "Well, we're gonna move back to Texas. This is not working for us. That was a better environment for us." So we got back as fast as we could, and I crawled into high school and got back into theater, and was very fortunate again to have some very dynamic people that I got to work with, both students and teachers. But Cammie, at that time, Cammie Brown, who was a new teacher, and I was a new student in that school, and she basically became my theater mentor as our theater teacher there. And if it wasn't for her, I probably would not have become a theater educator. And I firmly believe that. I think I had a lot of people who helped me, groom me in different respects. For example, I was a PAL student, and that was really important to me because there was that mentoring component to it. So that kind of shaped a little bit of my lens, so to speak. But definitely she helped me get to the next step, which was to pursue theater. And I ended up going to Stephen F. Austin in Nacogdoches and getting my undergraduate degree in performance. It was a BFA, and that was a fantastic program to be a part of, not only because of the faculty of the university, many of whom are no longer there, but a couple are, and just the diversity of the student body and the different material that we were able to engage with was something that I had not ever thought would be something that I would be doing. And it really took my understanding of what theater was to a completely different level. Much, not to say that what we did in middle school and high school wasn't, cerebral or anything like that, but obviously it's just, it's different, right? And so having that opportunity to engage with the literature from that perspective really reinforced that I thought that that's something that I could do pretty much for the rest of my life. Even though I questioned it a few times. There was that moment where I think many of us probably had where I was like, I think I'm just going to hang this up and like go be a doctor or something, right? Not that I had any business doing that, but I definitely had those moments once or twice throughout that experience. But being able to attend that university was really a blessing and a great opportunity. And what that did was two things, really. One, it allowed me to pursue an internship to work in the artistic office at the Arizona Theater Company in Tucson, Arizona, which is a really fantastic LORT theater that works still today, both in Tucson and in Phoenix. But the second greatest thing that it did is it allowed me the opportunity to meet my future wife, who, after finishing the internship and hightailing it back to Texas, said yes when I said, hey, do you want to do this thing kind of for the rest of our lives? So there's some really great things that came out in addition to the learning opportunities and the theatrical opportunities that I had access to. And so from there, I know I'm kind of jumping around really fast from different areas of my development here, but from there, I got an opportunity really last minute to start my teaching career. When I say last minute, I'm talking like 72 hours before kids walk through the door last minute. Like I got hired on a Friday and kids were coming through the door Monday morning. And part of the reason why that happened that way is because I did not pursue education in my undergraduate degree. It was purely performance studies. And so I did not add any education courses on any of my work. And so, of course, you know, in hindsight, anybody that's thinking about that as an option, I would always advise, hey, it's always a good idea at least to have some of that in your back pocket. Not to say that it's a fallback, but it actually can really help you as a theater practitioner as well. I firmly believe that. And plus, my dad was always saying, hey, you need to do that. And I'd always say, no. And of course, when dad says to do something, you tend not to do it. So there you go. And so he got the last laugh. I needed to find a way to become an educator. And so thankfully at that time, this was during No Child Left Behind. And so emergency placement certificates were definitely a thing because there was a mass exodus of teachers and they needed to find highly qualified professionals in the classroom. And I just so happened to find like one of the last remaining gigs in the greater Houston area. And Clear Creek ISD was kind enough to accept my resume through fax because that was, yes, also a thing. And I sent it, I think, on a Wednesday. No, I take that back. I sent it on a Monday and I gave it a couple days. I had kind of a day job in San Antonio living with my parents. And I got real nervous, and I'm so glad that at that young of an age, I guess I was 21. I had to have been 22, 21 or 22. It doesn't matter. I was young. And I took the initiative to pick up the phone and call the school. And, you know, I'll get to maybe this in a second, because I think this is really important in what I do now. And that's being able to take some risks. And so as a young person looking for my first opportunity, I decided to take that risk, pick up the phone, and an assistant principal took my call. And I explained, hey, this is who I am. I sent my resume over fax. You know, I don't know exactly what it is that you're looking for, but I'd really like the opportunity to speak with you. And this very kind, gentle soul said, okay, let's talk. So we had a conversation, and I don't know if they were desperate. They likely were. But I hope I said a few things that convinced him that despite that desperation, that I might have been a good fit. And so we finished the conversation, and he said, okay, here's what I need you to do. I need you to, come on Friday. You're going to come down to League City, which is where the school district office is and where the campus was. And you need to meet the principal. I said, okay, sounds great. So packed of not even a suitcase, I think it was a backpack, jumped in my car, drove down to the campus, and then nervously sat in my car waiting for a phone call, thinking that, well, I don't know how this works. Do I just walk into the school? Because, you know, at that time, teachers were obviously in the building, kids were not. but I don't know what that means. I have no idea what school looks like as a teacher. And so finally I get the call, says, yeah, come on in and meet so-and-so. I come in and I'm waiting outside the principal's office. And then finally I get the okay to go in there, and I go in, and there's just this very stoic figure, this manly man, and I'm just this little boy coming in thinking that like I'm, I've never been in the principal's office, and so here I am really now, like, how does this work? And I sit down, and he kind of does this thing where he just leans back in his chair, and it's so stereotypical, like the image, if you can paint this, and he crosses his arms across his chest, and he leans back, and he just kind of looks at me, and I'm just sitting there smiling, and he just nods his head. He goes, all right. And I said, okay. He goes, yeah, I just wanted to get a look at you. And I went, oh, okay, that's great. And I said, so what's next? And he goes, yeah, you just go over to human resources. They'll take care of the rest. So I get back in my car and I drive, and I go to human resources, and they're like, yeah, okay, well, it's going to be a few hours. We got to process your whatever. And so I'm sitting in my car in the parking lot of human resources, and it's like 3:30, 4 o'clock. And finally I get the phone call, and they're like, okay, we're going to go ahead. You're conditionally hired, or, whatever. And we'll need you to come back on Monday morning. School starts at whatever time, be there by 6:30. And you'll get with your mentor teacher. And I'm like, okay, I don't know what any of this means, but either way, I had to jump back in my car, I'd drive all the way back to San Antonio. I had to actually pack a real suitcase, in addition to figuring out where the heck I was going to live. And then I came back on Monday morning, and there I was in a class full of kids with no experience whatsoever, and no idea what I was going to do with them for the entire day. But what I do remember with that experience was that I was smiling at the end. And despite all the probably terrible teaching and instructing and managing of behavior and all those things that I had that day, I definitely came out of it feeling really good about the experience. So all that translated into 4 total years at that campus. And then from there, I had a really great opportunity to, at that time, transition to where I am today, which is Cypress Fairbanks ISD. And I took a lead position at Cypress Woods High School, and that was in 2009, and I stayed there till 2014. And since 2014, I've been in my current role, which is secondary fine arts coordinator, with a couple different responsibilities, but theater being one of them, dance in addition to that, and then some leadership groups. And ironically, PALS, which takes me back to one of those inspirational moments as a young person in high school, learning and developing. And so that's kind of my story. I spent a lot of time on the front end there, and not so much on the end there.
No,
I'm sure we'll fill it in.
Yeah, no, that's good. And I guess, I know I've known you for a while now. We're not best buddies or anything. We're not hanging out and grabbing drinks, which we should at some point. But
yeah, absolutely.
But I didn't realize you've been in this position since 2014. Like that last little fact there, I can't believe it's been. I mean, you're probably also thinking, man, I can't believe it's been that long. But already,
yeah,
it's a while. So
it has been a while. It's funny you bring that up because my wife and I, we were looking at photographs for a project that we were working on. And I happened to find a photo that I took my first year in this job. And, I was excited, new administrator, trying to build the morale of the team. And I took like a selfie, and everybody of the staff was behind me, like, one of those moments. And my hair was completely brown. and she just looks at me and she goes, your hair was so much darker. So since 2014, it's gotten a lot grayer.
Yeah. You're like, I know, sweetie, I'm looking at the same photo. Like, that's funny. Well, that's funny. So I wrote down a couple of things. First of all, I knew you weren't from Texas, but I didn't realize you were as traveled as you were. I didn't realize you were a military family. So not being from Texas and being that military family, did that shape you at all as a theater person, an educator, an administrator? Like, did that have any effect on you? Maybe discipline or, again, I'll kind of stall a little bit so you can think about this. But personally, I never moved. My dad was a class clown. He was in radio. And so if you walk into my classroom, that's very apparent. It's, that's my background. It's that jovial side. And I'm not trying to say you're not jovial, but but being the story you had with how your first day of teaching went, that would be, and I know you kind of said, the discipline of my classroom probably that day was probably not so great, but still there's an element of the military discipline probably had a sort of impact on how you went about that first day. And whether you think about that or not, or thought about that or not, I would venture to guess that maybe it had something to do with it. I mean, I'll let you have the floor now. So
sure. Yeah. Yes and no, really, right? So I think sometimes there's this idea that military families or military kids in particular grow up kind of in this environment where it's incredibly structured and it's yes sir, no ma'am, that kind of stuff. And to a certain degree, I think that's a true statement and a true belief. Certainly respect was always, routines were always important as well. But I had two very different parents. Even though my dad was, the professional on the military side, as a military family, you still live with a bunch of other people and other kids on bases or in base housing. And so it kind of is just a normal experience of growing up. I mean, you go to, sometimes if you didn't go to a school on a base, you went to a regular public school that was in the community that the base was where you were stationed. And so that being said, my dad has always been, he's like where I get kind of my analytical side, and my mom is the creative side. And that's where I hope I can say that I've gained some of that from her, because, the two of them really created an environment. I have two brothers, for us to really just kind of explore and be ourselves. I mean, things like playing sports was normal. Those were things that we did. And when I say normal, it wasn't like an expectation, but it was an opportunity. So we had that. I remember one time in base housing, there would be these activities for the youth. They have a place called the Youth Center, which is where basically instead of the kids going out on the streets at night and getting in trouble, we're going to funnel them all here to this place because it has things like pool tables and foosball and pinball machines, right? And then they would do like game nights and stuff like that. And so we would go, and sometimes there would be creative things that we could do, whether it was a lip sync contest or maybe it was, you would do some type of sketch comedy or something like that. So I think that those experiences really definitely shaped and kind of connected me to some of those things that I ultimately can say influenced my path. But as far as like the regiment, it was there sort of. I definitely never talked back to my parents until at least my dad was retired. Once he retired, then I guess I could say, well, he doesn't put that uniform on and intimidate me so much anymore. But I don't know if I directly answer your question, but
no, it's your answer is your answer. You're allowed to do that. What military, what was he in? What branch?
Yeah, she was in the Air Force.
Okay. And I don't think you said that, but I was just, if you did, my apologies, but
nope,
okay.
I didn't say it. I'm sorry.
Okay. All right. So do you have any interest in flying? Like, was that ever a thing?
So it's weird, right? So we had a lot of opportunities, and not every base that we either lived on or were stationed next to was an Air Force base. Sometimes it would be an Army base, and sometimes it could be what they would just call like a depot, right? And so it could be kind of a couple of different branches that would live there. And so regardless of where we were, there was always access to things like air shows. And that was huge. Like when an air show was on the base or in close proximity, we were there. And I think that really helped grow this fascination with mechanics. And that kind of analytical side of me really was fascinated by those components. You would think after having access to all of that, that flying would be like a thing that I'm super excited to do. And it is by far not. I am terrified to actually be in a plane, to the point where it's like, okay, so where is the Tylenol and the glass of wine, right? Like I need those two things stat so that I can forget that this flight is actually happening. But it was never something that was like, oh, I want to be a pilot, but I have a tremendous amount of respect and fascination for people who do, engage in that activity. But strangely enough, if Elon Musk were to show up at my door right now and be like, hey, you're one of the 4 people who's going up tonight, because that's a thing right now, these civilians are going into space, I would totally sign up. And I don't know why that is. I guess in my brain, I have said, well, that's different than flying because you're kind of, you're not necessarily like parallel to the ground, you're a little more vertical than that. So
yeah, you're going away, not with.
Exactly. So something about that fascinates me. So if I ever had a chance to not do what I'm doing and go back and start all over, I would definitely probably try to become an astronaut.
Do you think the Elon Musk thing is like the new Ed McMahon thing? Like he's going to come knocking on the door to say, you've just earned the opportunity?
Sure. I mean, as long as he shows up with like those cool spacesuits, sign me up.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Speaking of guys that try to forget things, but yeah, he, as we record this, I think that's happening like right now. I mean, or it just happened or something, but
something like that.
Those 4 civilians going up, but that's great. So, I'll get back to more current stuff in just a second, but when you were in Three Musketeers, you mentioned, and I don't know why this stayed in my head, but you mentioned that all you did was yell, that kind of thing, or in hindsight, you probably think all you did was yell. Do you think you were directed to do something different, but all you were just so excited to be bit by the bug kind of thing? Or was that just the theater that it was, and they were just like, whatever, I'm glad you're on stage, not crying. Go do what you need.
Yeah,
that kind of thing.
I was probably that kid that they were like, oh, let's give this kid a chance to be on a play, right? And no matter how many different ways that he as a director probably tried to shape the way that I said these few lines, and we all know what I'm talking about. At the end of the day, you can hear me and you can understand me, and check that box. This kid he's done everything that I need him to do, at least for the purpose of this performance.
I was just curious because we've all had those kids that you're just like, all right, they're doing the basics, the things that we need them to do.
Yep.
That's great. So you another thing that in whether Jim Johnson can probably pick up on some of this stuff, but you've been a Texan, you've been a New Yorker, what do they call a Wisconsinite? I don't know what they call
Cheesehead.
Cheesehead, I know, right? Well, yeah, but a Madisonian, but your accent, you don't have, you've got that kind of similar neutral to myself. I mean, kind of neutral, if we wanted to turn it on, we could turn it on kind of thing. But do you ever find yourself shifting from one to another, or do you ever like get mad at yourself? Like, dang it, I can't believe I just said y'all, or
I have embraced it. No, I am truly, even though I fondly and unconditionally love New York, and it'll always be there with me, a part of me. I am a Texan, and it took me a long time to admit that. But really, this is where I've lived the most. This is where most of my memories are, and I don't know how I've been able to refrain from catching any type of dialect. I guess primarily, because when you think about it, San Antonio, it's a very diverse city.
Yeah.
But again, it's a military city too. And so it was almost like when we came from kind of upstate New York, Pennsylvania, because we lived there as well, it's kind of just, you're taking that experience and you're just putting it now in basically the Southwest, right? Or the South. And there were a lot of people that, were identified with, and so I don't know if that somehow just influenced the fact that I don't really have one. But every now and again, I'll catch myself and a little bit of New York will come out, just a little bit. Because upstate New York and New York City are two totally different places.
Yeah. When was the last time you moved?
Well, I mean, in a house.
Like houses.
Yeah, just 2 years ago. So
okay, I feel like, because like I never moved until I was, I don't know. Well, I guess I technically moved to a dorm for a couple months at Sam Houston, but I left Sam Houston quickly and went back home. But really moved out of the house until I was 24. So, and you moved, by the time you were 24,
And that's actually a part of us. Like, my wife thinks we're crazy. Like, we've purchased a few homes since we've been married, and lived in several apartments before that. And she's just kind of adopted this idea that that's normal for me, and therefore it's normal for her. But it's not because like I'm dissatisfied or I need something different. It literally is just, that's the fabric of who I am. Like, my landscape changed so often that it's like not uncomfortable for me to just pack up and go to do something else. So the fact that we've lived in Cyprus now for 12 years, we've lived out here for 12 years. I mean, that's a pretty good track record for me.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. But to be fair, Cyprus has grown immensely in 12 years. I mean, it's like probably just as fast, if not faster than Fort Bend, where I came from. So Cyprus is blowing up. So just Bridgeland, Bridgeland. Yeah. Bridgeland itself is its own town. It's so
it's getting there. Yeah. we like to think we are, but we got a long ways to go.
It's massive. So okay, so when you got that first job in Clear Creek, you sort of mentioned the desperation thing, and maybe that is the truth, but was there something you think that the principal saw in you that or read on a resume or knew from some sort of information? Do you think there was something other than desperation that the principal, because desperation can only go so far. If you have a criminal record, they still are probably not going to hire you, but even if you're charming. But what is it that you think maybe they kind of found in Tim Estelle?
Yeah, so what I didn't talk about in great detail. So prior to that, like I said, we were, or rather I was in Tucson and doing an artistic internship. And one of the last elements of that internship was working in the education department. And so that experience has been pretty much foundational in why I actually follow through with becoming an educator, because working with students in that capacity as a representative of professional theater, but watching them engage with the art as students, and mainly we work with students in high school, and listening to them and the questions that they would ask, and then the responses that they would make towards the art or the whatever it was that we were working with them on. That to me, combined with while at SFA, they had a high school theater workshop, and I always worked that, with the exception of the summer between my freshman and sophomore year of undergrad. I worked that every summer after that. Even after I graduated, I did it that final summer before I was hired as a teacher. And I think those experiences kind of helped state my case a little bit, because even though I had that as experience in working with high school students and I was vying for a high school job, I hope that my passion came through, articulating why those experiences were so important to me, because they truly were. And some of those kids, not only in the Arizona experience, I hope they're doing well, but definitely some of the ones that came through that high school theater camp at SFA, I'm still connected with today as adults. And it's just, is very powerful, when you make those connections and those relationships, and you can do it through something that you mutually have a passion for.
Yeah.
And I'm preaching to the choir here to everybody listening, but I think all that to say, when I was able to just kind of share that with that individual who was ultimately hiring me, and why that's so important to me when I interview people, to hear that from my side now. If you can do that for me, and you can show me that you're going to love and take care of kids, then we can help you become a stronger teacher. If you don't have those tools or maybe that knowledge base yet, I can help fill in some of those gaps with some really great resources and the expertise of our colleagues. But if you don't care about what you're doing and you're just showing up for that paycheck, then there's plenty of other places that I can recommend that aren't us.
Yeah. So two questions out of that little bit, and you don't have to name names in this one, but do you have teachers in Sci-Fair right now that were students of the camp that you know of? Or do you have, or were there teachers that came out of that you still keep in touch with, that may not be in Sci-Fair, just around?
So I'd have to really dig in my brain. So the short answer is yes to, are there teachers from that experience? The short answer is yes. Do we have any in our district? No. However, we definitely have homegrown teachers. So we have folks who have gone through our school system and have come back to work for us. And to me, having started my life in a smaller town, rural New York and Pennsylvania is well, it's smaller, right? And then you come to a place like Sci-Fair, and we have 116,000 students, and we only have 50 some odd theater teaching positions, and we get former students to come into those roles. That just, to me, is so wonderful. And it says a lot about the community. It says a lot about the culture of our district.
Right. Yeah, you have a good district. Speaking as a former employee, not a former teacher, as a former employee, I'll get to that in a second. But
the Bear Center.
Why are you spoiling it? So when did you realize you wanted to get into administration? Like, when was that kind of when did you have that moment of wow, this would be a path that I would want to go on? Because as an artist, and I'm the same way. I have a master's in education with the path of administration, but as an artist, that's like almost the complete opposite of how our mind is trained. Yet some of us do it, and I probably am speaking for you a little bit, is based on advocacy. We want to create a world where you understand, and not you, but other people that don't understand kind of our world and why it's important, and et cetera, et cetera. But when did you kind of have that moment of realization that you wanted to follow that path?
Yeah. So I'll be completely honest, and becoming an actual administrator was never anything on my radar. Wasn't a professional goal. It was something that I knew that if I wanted to do that, the pathway that I took to get what many people call your mid-management degree, right, or certificate, or go through a Master's of Ed program. Obviously, that's a stepping stone to that. For me, it was 2011 or 12, and there was an opportunity. So one of the great things about our district, much like Fort Bend did this and does this as well, and several other districts in our area, there's a lot of great partnerships with universities. And so one of those partnerships at that time was with SFA, and it was through the education department. And so obviously I had already had the experiences in undergrad with the university, really enjoyed my time and experience with that. And so I just went to the informational meeting about the Masters of Ed program with the intention of getting a license to be a principal. And so went to that, felt really good about the direction that program could take me. And so I knew I could not commit to a traditional master's program. I wasn't going to be able to stop my job. It just wasn't realistic for me, although I know it is for some folks. And so it felt like a really great time in my career, because I felt really grounded where I was at Cy-Woods High School. I had a really great colleague that I know could, pick up my slack, because I was definitely going to have a lot of it going through that program. And I just dove right in. And next thing I know, 2 years later, I've got it. And that was it. I thought I was done. I had learned, I had absorbed more information. I felt like I had a new perspective on the next wave of what education could be for me, not only as a teacher or as a theater practitioner, but just as an educator. And, school wrapped up, and it had been years since my wife and I had gone on a vacation. And so we booked a cruise, and we were in Alaska, and I get a phone call and it says, "Hey, we have this opportunity. They're creating this position." I'm like, what? They're what? They're creating what? And they're like, "Yeah, they're creating this position specific to theater." And to answer your question more directly, the way it worked for us in terms of like support at the central office or at the central administration, we didn't really have a person there, much like some of our other disciplines did at the time. I mean, we all know that music has had strong support for a very long time. And so there's always been an advocate in the office for them.
Yeah.
But since we were kind of lumped into academics at large, we had a really great support system from a person that was working on the campus I taught at. But she didn't have a theater lens, right? It was kind of baptism by fire. She was literally learning the discipline with us while she was doing her full-time job as being a director of the entire campus's instruction. And so she was the one that actually said, "Hey, they're creating this. I think you should try it. You should maybe throw your name out there." And so I thought about it, and I did. And, that was in the summer of 2014. And, I left the school in May thinking I'd be back. I didn't go back in August because I was in an office in July.
Yeah.
And so I say all that because, again, my goal was not to do that. I was very satisfied being in my teaching position and in my role as a fine arts, a part of the fine arts program at the campus I was at. I had a fantastic campus administration, great colleagues, great students, great community. I'd be a fool to give it up unless there was something that could help me maybe do something else that would advocate and work, for people. And so this job kind of sold me on that.
Yeah. So how was that Alaskan cruise? Was it,
it was amazing. It was amazing until I had all these nerves about, oh my gosh, now I have to interview for a job. How do I even do that?
So I watch, I'm a huge fan of The Deadliest Catch. And so whenever somebody says they go on an Alaskan cruise, all I imagine is being on a crabbing boat, going through the Bering Sea and just treacherous waters.
Yes, it was exactly that.
Yeah. They put you to work. All right. Yeah, that'd be great. So, okay. So, Kat came out of the bag a little bit with, I guess we kind of just crossed paths. I wouldn't say we became friendly or friends by any means when I was at the Berry Center, because I guess I can say it now, it's statute of limitations, but I used the Berry Center as a bridge between tours of Straight No Chaser. And now that said, that gig became, I ended up working at the Berry Center longer than I worked with Straight No Chaser in various capacities, but as the theater manager or whatever, I don't remember what my title was, but I was there for a little bit. And my first interaction with you was through One Act Play, because they would host One Act Play contests there, a couple of different zone districts, etc. But and you came through, and all I remember from you, and maybe this is insulting, but it's just all I remember from you, is you had you wouldn't leave your backpack. You had a backpack on, like it was almost like it was a turtle shell attached to you that you couldn't part with. And so I have to know, like what was in the back, like what was, it wasn't an iron lung by any means, but what was
it was probably just some a comb
like
and
tape. Yeah.
Find nothing important. That's so funny. You're right. I never took that stupid thing off. I still don't. I still carry a backpack.
Yeah. So when you got this job that you're in now, it's like the guy with the backpack got that job. Okay. All right. Cool.
Yeah.
Like, I wonder what was in the backpack though. Yeah. So
all my secrets.
yeah, that's funny. So anyway, but that's what I remember about you. I do remember in the analytical side, in all seriousness, you mentioned that you get the analytics from your dad and sort of the creative side from your mom. And I'm the same, but opposite. So I get the analytics from my mom and the creative from my dad. I think just from what I remember from your shows and from your scenery, you could see the creative analytics, if you know what I mean. Like there was a certain type of structure and the way you always went about your the way you treated your students in a positive way, not like you weren't waterboarding your students by any means, but yeah. But but I mean, there was this still, and I didn't know anything about the military. I didn't know anything about you, but I could tell that there was a structure to how you did things, and you appreciated that. And your students, whether they appreciated it before UIL, they definitely had bought in by the time they came to compete. And so you're one of two people that I've ever seen kind of do that, and it's always worked. So was that something you consciously made an effort to do, to build in that sort of, and I don't want to say militaristic, because that's kind of a negative, that puts kind of a negative flavor on things, but that sort of just structured, not as loose, if you will. Was that kind of a conscious effort on your part as a director?
Yeah, I think so. And it kind of goes back to your earlier question about how maybe that influenced a little bit.
Yeah.
So I was big on planning. I was big on agendas, or I was big on process. And so it was important to me to convey to the students that if we presented ourselves in a very certain way, not to say that like everything that we did was very intentional, because obviously, kids are kids, and they're going to have opportunities to be themselves in that environment, especially when they're vulnerable in a situation like UIL, where you're trying to get ready for all of this. But the structure came in because I thought, in my opinion, it helped the students become more successful. And by that, it presented them in a way to other people. So you're kind of affirming that a little bit, at least for me, that if you looked at our group, you would say, well, I think they know what they're doing, right?
Yeah.
And we may not have known what we were doing, but at least we were going to look like
you're acting.
Yeah. Yeah. But it was also important to me that, because not only are we a reflection of the program that we're there, to produce, but we're also a reflection of our school, and we're a reflection of our communities. And to me, that's so important, because I don't ever want somebody to look at something that I had a little bit of influence over, or even today, I don't want anybody to look at any of our programs in our district and have something negative to say about them. You may not necessarily like the way that we do things, but that I'm okay with that. If that's very subjective, right? But if you have something that is objectively negative about something that I was responsible for, or something my colleagues are responsible for, that's very personal to me. And so it was so important to have a little bit of that structure built in, because it prevented that from happening to the kids that I cared the most about. I didn't want anybody to ever create a negative impression of who they were as a person. I wasn't going to be responsible for doing that for them.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, that was profound. And usually I would end the conversation there, but I have one more question for you. Sure. Well, I have two more. This one's more fun. The other one is not as well. It's not fun. But do you miss like acting? Do you miss that side of things? The experience you had in college and then in Arizona. And by the way, I wore this purple today because go Jacks. Yeah. Anyway, Action Jacks. That's what I meant to say. Yeah.
Go Jacks.
Anyway, I'm so stupid.
It's like a catchphrase for a cereal.
That's true. Apple Jacks. Yeah. Good cereal, but not. They don't sponsor this podcast. But but anyway, do you like miss that sort of that feeling you had when you were shouting in Three Musketeers? Do you miss that at all?
No.
Okay.
I'll be honest. Acting was never going to be the thing that I pursued in this career
Yeah.
field. It was something that I think I enjoyed, and I appreciated the elements and the work that went into it. But
Yeah.
by no measure would I have been able to hold my own in that world. And I realized that pretty early in my college undergraduate career. But because I was trying to get a degree in it, I needed to follow through,
Yeah.
so I did.
Yeah.
But what I will say is what I do absolutely miss, even still today, is being in a classroom.
Right.
That to me is where I'm most comfortable. That's where I feel like I've done, again, in my opinion, some of my best work. Not to
Yeah.
say that hopefully I'm not doing terrible stuff right now, but if you asked me that question, the answer would be absolutely yes.
Yeah.
I miss that every single day.
So yeah, I mean, you can only be cast as the third tree from the left so many times before you realize that dream is probably not going to be a reality. But so you missed the classroom. Do you ever get the chance to kind of, and again, this wasn't the last question, but you went there. Do you ever get the chance to kind of, I mean, with T-tests and things like that, are you able to, I know you go in the classroom to evaluate, not on the T-test level. It's like Travis did for us. We'd just go in and kind of give some feedback, some good constructive criticism. But do you ever get to workshop, or like, do you ever say to one of your directors, hey, would you mind if I taught a lesson on X, Y, and Z or whatever it is?
So I don't go into their classroom and ask them that question specifically. Although you've given me an idea, but now some of them, if they're listening or will listen, they're going to be like, no, they're going to not even unlock their door. But I when I go in, let's just put it this way. So I do not serve a formal observational role, much like you said. I go in, and sometimes if a teacher meets me at the door and we exchange pleasantries, all I say to them is, I'm here to hang out. That's my phrase. And so if my teachers are listening, you ever hear me say, I'm here to hang out, I'm legitimately there to do that. And part of the reason is to fulfill two purposes. One is to fulfill my own selfish need to be back in a classroom, right? But two, it's because I'm not in there as I'm not there to get anybody, right? Because I'm already confident that because you're in the room, we've already made the right choice before I even came in the room, right? Because we made that choice to place you, if I had some influence on that, in that room. Or if you've been there before I've been in this role, then somebody else had that confidence in you. So I'm not there to get anybody. I'm there simply as a support system to check in with the kids and make sure that they're enjoying their experience in a theater classroom. And then certainly from an evaluative point of view, I want to make sure that we're teaching the objectives that are required to be taught. And so if, obviously, if we can do those things, then all I need to do is hang out, because that's happening all the time in every single classroom that I get to go into.
Well, and this is one of the things that I appreciated from a Travis Springfield and a Philip Taylor especially, is whether you are the best at what you do or I'm the best at what I do doesn't mean that we don't still have room for improvement. And sometimes it takes that second set of eyes to help you realize, oh, maybe next time try this or try that or whatever. And a lot of times that's actually the case, and it works. It's, again, like you said, I love how you said somebody's already, whether you hired them or not, or it was before your time, somebody has thought you were worthy of that job. So why should we try to get you out of that job? So yeah, it's good on you. That's a good philosophy. And I hope other, not just with Cy-Fair, I'm assuming Cy-Fair is okay, but in Fort Bend and places like that, but and even Dallas with Rachel and with Jackie up north, there are certain districts that don't have it, Tim Estelle, that don't have a Philip Taylor, Philip Morgan, a Travis Springfield, that those people might feel like they're walking on eggshells all the time because they don't have somebody there like you all to help support that classroom and understand that. So
yeah, somebody that gets it, right?
Yeah. So, okay. So last question. You have talk to a lot of people to as prospective teachers in your district. I don't want you giving any details at all, but I've asked this of college people, and I want to try to phrase it similar for you, but for college professors and like a Jim Johnson, a Cleo House, people like that, I've said to, or an Aaron Brown, I've said, hey, what is it that we are missing as high school educators that you want to see us do a better job of to prepare college kids for, or high school students for college? Okay. So I want to know something from you've been in this job for almost 10 years now. We'll round up, I know.
Yeah,
but
thanks. That's great. That's very generous of you.
But we'll just assume you get there, but we'll round up to 10. But you've been in this job long enough to be professional at it, right? They say 3 years or more. And is there something that you would love? We'll say a new teacher. I don't want to say a veteran or experienced teacher, but a new teacher. Is there something that you would love to see them kind of either forget about, like, hey, it's okay that you aren't this or that. We want to see you focus more on this side of the interview. And my dogs are barking in the background, and I apologize. They're probably barking at the air. But anyway, is there something that you would love to see that new teacher kind of say, hey, it's okay, relax. Like, let's focus more on the art. Let's focus more on the classroom skills, the pedagogy element. I don't need you to tell me how you played Belle in your high school production of Beauty and the Beast, or whatever it might be. But again, I'm stalling just to kind of, because I never prep my people for the questions I'm going to ask. So, I want you to kind of speak on that and end on that as well. So,
sure. So obviously I'm only going to speak for myself, because somebody may have a different perspective and a different response to this. For me, with a new teacher coming in, wanting to be in one of our schools, I think, again, for me, what's most important is that they understand that they are going to be recommended for hire to first and foremost be the teacher of the classes that they're responsible for. Obviously, we're also looking for somebody who's going to be able to come in and create a really dynamic and engaging extracurricular, some people will use the phrase co-curricular, but extracurricular activity where students can then use kind of this lab to expand on the things that they're doing in their classroom. But often, well, I shouldn't say often, sometimes I'll get, maybe somebody to come in who's very excited about the artistic component of their job and discounts all the stuff that happens between 7:20 a.m. and 2:50 p.m., right? And that's a lot of kids to not think about before we get to the end of the day, where maybe we have 30, 40, or 50 of them in that extracurricular component. So I would always encourage new teachers, when you're coming in, remember your main reason, right? Your purpose there is to be an educator, and you're going to be able to do that so well through your productions, because you're going to have those crop of kids that really want to absorb that information. But there also may be one of those kids or two of those kids who exist in one of your classrooms who just haven't had that potential tapped yet. And if we don't even think about them as somebody who has the same potential as the kids after school, then we're going to lose them the minute that we get them. And so I really always keep that at the front of their perspective when they are, thinking about where it is that they want to work. And then secondly, I always tell new teachers who are interviewing, remember, the interview works both ways, right? Like, I'm looking for somebody who's going to take care of our programs and our schools and our kids and our communities. I need you to affirm that you believe me, right? Because if you don't think that I'm telling you truth, or you don't get a good vibe from me or from our district, then it's not a good fit. And it's okay if you go a separate direction. I can accept that, right? Because it's going to be a lot harder if you try to fight against that feeling that you have. Accept a job because, as you said earlier, like you kind of need that paycheck, right? Even though you're going to wait 2 months before you get that first one, and you're miserable and you don't like it, or you don't like whatever, or you just, so those two things are really, really important to me. And we see sometimes in other disciplines, not theater specifically, where some university programs, and I'm not naming names and I'm not calling anybody out because I don't think I have a right to do that, but sometimes the training in those programs has made all this they are worthy of being are performers or in the performance environment, and that teaching is that secondary thing, right? And even though earlier I said, pick up some of those education classes, have some of those in your back pocket. I mean that in terms of having that as a tool or a resource that you can use regardless of whether you pursue teaching or not. But I think that we need to maybe make sure that those kids in those university programs, regardless of what the artistic discipline is, understands that teaching is not selling yourself out, and teaching is not secondary to anything else. It can absolutely be primary, and it should be primary, because if you know your craft or know your art so well, then you should be able to walk in any classroom in this world and be able to teach it without any question and be really good at teaching it. So those are things that I hope that new teachers will keep in mind as they come in.
Minor wisdom.